home country of Denmark,
Yep.
there is an unwritten rule called the law of Hunte. Now, for any of you who don't know what the law of Hunte is, it means you are essentially no better than anyone else. It's a culture whereby, whatever your position, you're no more important than anyone else, you're no more special than anyone else, no matter where you are in the hierarchy. So my question to you is, when you were a 27-year-old artistic director at the Royal Danish Opera, how did you manage that context? And how were you, in your own words, upfront about the power you held in that position?
I think Denmark, in many ways, is a country that has. It's a very small country, 5 million people. It's smaller than London, and that has always led to Denmark having, as you say, the Jantelov, as we call it, the law of Jante, which is an expression of a country that's torn between inferiority complex. We're so small that do we really have a place in the world? And then at the same time, as all small countries, we have megalomania. And in many ways, I think that mirrors me as an artist. The mix of living with constant inferiority complex, thinking, well, I'm just a bluff. I don't know how I do this. I just pretend that I know how to stage an opera or run the Royal Opera House. And actually, all I do is hot air. I am a bluff. My job is a bluff. Leadership, to a large extent, is the bluff. And at the same time, of course, you can't do that bluff unless you have megalomania and think like, here we go ruling the world. So Denmark has this weird mix. And in that context, I think my trick was, well, two things. First of all, of course, I'm lucky that in the artistic world, maybe than in other worlds, there is an acceptance that there is such a thing as talent. Mm-hmm. In the artistic world, we do know that some people get to sing the lead role and other people are in the chorus. And we do somehow in the artistic world love the idea of new talent, of the breakthrough, the night when someone jumps in, has a huge success, and it's done, So there is that acceptance in the artistic world, maybe more than in other parts of Danish society. But I think also the way I chose to do it was try to be quite honest about it, and be honest about, not being sure always, not knowing what taking on that power meant, but asking questions. I had a big learning experience, having been appointed to run the Royal Danish Opera. I thought, let me go out and find out, actually, why are we doing opera? And I went to the opera house and I asked all the people there, why do we do opera? Help me tell that story. And you'd be surprised how many times I got, like, oh, why do we do opera? Because opera is great. Or, oh, because that's what we've always done. Or even the best one I ever got was, I asked someone at the Royal Danish Opera, why do we do opera? And they said, it's because it says in the Danish theatre law that's why we're here. Great. I can't wait to get to work, right? That's surely going to bring in masses of new audiences to opera. Of course, that's not why we do opera. I hope not. And so to start looking for, I think, was maybe the thing. To start going on that journey of finding answers and being curious was something I was quite transparent about. And hopefully that made me, accept it more readily than otherwise I might have been. But, for sure there were situations where I wished that I had been 55 and, had more ponders and more experience in firing people or handling difficult situations. And of course there's a certain vulnerability in being young. But there's also, you are allowed more curiosity, I think.
Yeah. Okay, and you talked about the difficulty of firing people, of taking those tough decisions as a leader. How do you deal with being the tough guy every now and again? I
think in a funny way, we are generally in the world shying away from accepting or embracing the idea of power. It's like we're all quite coquettish. Even, people in big organizations with lots of power, or politicians who do have a lot of, that's the whole point. Kind of, but it's not, for me, it's not about the power, it's about blah, blah, blah. Well, why not embrace that actually power is influence? You take on power, you take on responsibility. You take on responsibility for the organization, and thus reminding yourself that you're doing this on behalf of a lot of people. It's tough. What can I say? I think you have to accept power, because if you don't accept it, it will be, decisions will be made anyway. If I don't fire that person, that means we're not going to get that young talent in. And so if I choose to not, if I want clean hands, decisions are still going to be made. It's just going to be made by someone else. I know a lot of artists who say, I'd love to be the director, which means loving to make the speeches, love to come to the premiere parties, love to do all the fun stuff, but I don't want anything to do with the money. Well, tough luck, because if you don't want anything to do with the money, you have no real power. And then the power is going to be there anyway. So someone else is going to make those decisions, or the decisions will make themselves even worse. Yeah. So I think being quite conscious about the responsibility you take on, which helps you, because then it's not me. I'm not firing them. On behalf of the organization, I'm saying we need this change. But sure, it's difficult, and I've been in therapy for 13 years personally, and I once asked my therapist, I was very nervous, and I said, what if you clean me up? What if you fix me? Because I'm an artist, I need that. And also as a leader, I need my demons. I need all of that engine in me. What if you clean me up? And he said, oh, no worries. You need, I think to be a true leader today, you need to embrace that it is personal in the respect that you need to invest yourself personally, your values. You can't just deal with it by rules and regulations. You need to be there, inspire people. I think leadership through inspiration is my kind of new thing. And that you can only do if you invest yourself, and that means that you are vulnerable. So you need to recognize that and then deal with that by, for instance, having a therapist or making sure that you have the backup you need. I thought a lot about what, because leading in my organization, of course, we have a lot of divas. And I think a lot of organizations now more and more recognize the fact that you have divas, or let's call it special talent, prima donnas. I mean, actually, in the opera, originally, a prima donna is a very good thing. That's a very positive thing. It means that we have an ensemble, we have like 80 people singing at the same time. Somebody needs to sing the melody. Somebody needs to cut through all of that, and with their brilliant voice, pull like an engine, pull the whole train, and make it all, happen. That's the prima donna, the first lady. Unless you have a real special talent to do that, everybody else can work as hard as they want. It's never going to happen. On the other hand, of course, without the real backing of everybody else, she can't succeed. But to embrace that concept that it's okay that you have prima donnas, and how to deal with that, how to deal with them being difficult, having other demands that the rest of, so often we try to introduce management by values, and we talked about all these important values that we were going to run the organization by. And of course, it was only until the first moment where an important diva protested and one of them changed, and then we changed them. So, apparently they weren't so deep-rooted as we all thought. How do you deal with that? How do you address that? I try to understand what a diva is, and I'm sure you also know, I mean, in my organization, it's certainly, divas are not only the people on stage. I have divas in the admin and in the technical areas, I'm probably a bit of a diva sometimes myself. What is a diva? For me, I thought a lot about it. It's something about when you work in a job with high pressure where you never know if you're good enough, when you don't have objective criteria. So we know, being a manager, a leader in the old days would be like, black numbers on the bottom line, good results, you have a surplus, you're great. Today, it's like you have to be a coach, you have to think about the future and strategic influences, and you have to think about values, and you have to embrace such a wide range of things that you can never quite tell, am I good enough? And in all jobs where you eventually don't know, like an artist on stage, some people love them, other people hate them. How can you ever know if you're good enough if you can't measure it? If you have a job that ultimately can't completely be measured, I think you're vulnerable, and that can make you a diva in the sense that you need another kind of leadership, you need another kind of handling, you need another kind of love in order to function.
Okay, so of course some of those divas are your best performers, as you've mentioned. So how do you, one of the topics we've looked at today is about loosening control as a leader without losing control. Yeah. So how do you loosen the control so you get the best out of your divas without losing control of them altogether?
I think transparency is key. I think the fact that you talk to your teams and you say, okay, these are the values we want to run the company by, but I'm not going to lie to you. There are talent that is so special up there that we are going to bend the rules for them. We don't want the Royal Opera House or the Royal Danish Opera to be only about mediocre, nice people. We need some artists to come in who are absolutely the best in the world and are brilliant. And they live under a pressure. I mean, imagine the pressure they're under. A singer, I worked once, I did a production of Don Carlo. A Danish Metz, a wonderful, wonderful woman, struggled to learn one of the big roles. It was a big new kind of win for her to sing that role. She works on it for years. She absolutely committed herself, did fantastic artistic work. She struggled with one of the arias, and on opening night, she did break on one of the high notes, and it didn't go so well. And the moment that the lights go out after 3 years of work, still dripping with sweat on the stage, the first thing she hears is boo! How do you cope with that kind of pressure? You have other demands. And if you talk to the rest of the organization about the pressure they are under, if you talk to them about, we know that this person will come in and be difficult, but even if he is difficult to you, we as a team know that when he leaves, we will still be good to each other. We still are loyal to each other. And we can as an organization embrace that. We can cope with that. We can deal with that. We can be flexible enough to protect that special talent, to work with it and get the best out of it for our purpose, because we need it to inspire us. But of course, it is, I introduced, and a lot of people didn't like it, I introduced when I was in Copenhagen, I introduced something I called the bullshit factor. And there is, for me, when the talent exceeds, as long as the talent exceeds the bullshit, we're going to have them. The moment the bullshit starts out exceeding the talent, then we say no more, please. And that's important that you do say that to staff. There is a limit. There are things you can't do. Yeah. But if the talent is exceptional, We will try and work with them, but to some degree, we have to get the best out of them. So you have to be honest to the organization about that. And then, of course, it's very important that when you make your, I think basically the best management tool I have in the world is my narrative about opera, why we do opera. And I need to not just do that with the star soprano, but to go in every now and then tell the chorus why we're doing this production, why it's so important, and make sure in my premiere speech that I say, yes, the soprano was fantastic, but had the chorus not backed her up in that big scene at the end of the second act, it would not have had the impact. If you put words to that, if you remember to recognize that, of course, I don't spend as much time with every chorus as I do with the lead soprano, but recognizing it in the key moments is absolutely important.
So you touched on receiving tough feedback there, and in the case of an operatic singer, the boos on stage, which sounds absolutely awful. But of course, as a leader, and a very public leader, there are people whose entire job is to critique the performances and what you do. How do you cope with that on an individual level, with that kind of visible
feedback? I think, first of all, you recognize that if you want to be an artist, or for that matter, a leader, you put yourself out there, you have to accept that not everybody is going to like what you're saying. And if you want to go into politics, or you want to go into arts, or you want to, that's part of the price you pay. And if you don't want that, then you can't have the fun part. They go together. I think it's important that we talk about in the organization that actually failing is not necessarily always a bad thing. We live, especially I think in this city, I think I struggle with that in London, success is what everybody wants. Everybody talks about creativity and innovation, but what they really want is success. Now, I think actually for an artistic organization at least, or any organization that really works with innovation, if you're too focused on short-term success, then that becomes about vanity. That becomes about just the easy win, and you actually lose the ability to take real risk. I had one of my best memories from London ever. If I ever do my memoirs about my time in London, this will be the headline. There was a tweet, somebody tweeting, as long as Kasper Holten is at the Royal Opera House, I'll never buy a ticket again because I hate what they do. Okay, fine. I answer, because you have to engage with the audience, and I think it's very important. No, I really believe it's important. You try to explain, why do we do what we do? You didn't like it, but other people did, and we did this because we think it's an important director, and we were trying to do this. So I engaged, 140 characters, as it is on Twitter. Quite complicated to have a complex discussion, but you try, and we go back and forth. And in his last, in my last tweet, I write something like, well, as an artistic organization, if we ever want to really succeed, we need to be able to take risks or something. And then he tweeted back, that's going to be the headline of my book, risk is fine as long as you have success with it. Yeah, great. There's maybe a slight problem with that. And that kind of goes, you want risk, but actually you only want the nice risk, the kind of comfy risk that isn't real risk. That is actually means like it sounds risky, but actually it's pretty safe. Now, artistic enterprise or real innovation requires actually sometimes the ability to take real risks. So I try to say to my organization, if we don't fail once a year, we're probably not trying hard enough. It's like skiing. If you never fall, you're probably not trying hard enough. The failure that was unqualified is, of course, not okay. I mean, if you don't spend enough money or planning, or you're sloppy, or people don't do their homework, that's not okay, of course. But the failure that just happens because everybody tried their hardest and had a great idea and were passionate about it, but at the end of the day, it just didn't gel or become quite what you had hoped for. That must absolutely be embraced by the organization. On a personal level, well, part of it is about, as I said, personal therapy, having some good friends. Red wine works as well, I found. There are good ways. And then, of course, again, you think about, we recently had a new production of Lucia di Lammermoor at the Opera House. I didn't direct it myself. Linda came to see it, and luckily you liked it. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of controversy around it. And some people were very, very, very angry. And they write pretty nasty things about me on the internet or in letters. And I think, yeah, of course, I don't want to upset people. But making art is also about making people react and upsetting them. And at least we provoke a reaction. And I would personally prefer to see a production that's irritating than one that's boring. Because we owe it to these great composers, these masterworks, these artistic, we owe it to take that risk that we upset people, make us think, and engage with it. It's like sometimes in our part of the world, we're so afraid of conflict. And, I often get told, oh, but these two artists are not happy with each other, and we need to go and intervene, and we need to make them all happy. I'm not sure a happy organization is always necessary. Obviously, an organization with respect and where you take care of people is important, but that's not always about everybody being happy. And I think we have this image, at least in Denmark we do, of creativity You know, if we just all had fat boys and we could sit a bit awkwardly in them and they're all orange, and we could be in a room where we could play with Lego bricks and paint on the wall, then we'd be super creative. I'm not so sure that's how it works. Actually, my creativity often happens on a grey Monday morning when I haven't had my coffee yet and I'm in the rehearsal room and I have to deliver. The best quote in the world is Leonard Bernstein. He said, to do something truly great, you need two things: a wonderful idea and not quite enough time. Mm-hmm. And there's something in that. You know, limitations, deadlines can actually be very, very, very productive for creativity.
Oh, fantastic. So you spoke before about how within an organisation, particularly in terms of people failing perhaps, leaders often have to deal with the truths that aren't necessarily spoken by other people in the organisation. Yeah. How do you manage that part of your leadership?
If I'm honest, that's not what we're best at in my world. Mm-hmm. We live in a very exposed world. As I said, the singers go on stage, they risk having boo. The directors, I go on stage, I get booed. It's very tough. And to be able to go back on that stage, you need love. So if straight after a show, if I say to the singer, right, you got boozed, that was really crap, huh? You know, they're never going to make it back on that stage. Mm. So we lie to each other. We lie. Okay. We say, you're wonderful. and we just don't like saying the hard things because it's too tough, because we're all super exposed. And that makes it difficult to be the leader because, of course, we have to announce the casting and say, you get to sing this part, you don't. And that's the truth. Because, of course, eventually the truth will come out. We're not stupid enough to hire people just to please them. Oh, please their egos. And that is tough because it means it is very difficult for us in a funny way. We are very good at giving feedback in the rehearsal room. That's why we're there. We have this fantastic place called the rehearsal room. We go in there, nobody's allowed, no cameras, no journalists, no audience, no Olivier committee, no nothing. We're just in there and we are supposed to fail. We're supposed to do things, and then the director says, actually, if you do that way instead, and then you do it again, and then it gets better. And once we reach the stage, it's better because we rehearsed it. Mm. But that security of that is that rehearsal space ultimately. Sorry, I forgot my point. Anyway, where was that taking me? About truth. Yes, of course. As good as we are at handling truth. In that process, we are incredibly organizationally bad at handling truth and feedback. And funnily enough, all the things we're great at, and it's one of the things I keep asking Linda, we have to do a book one day about that. The opera house is surprisingly bad at giving feedback in the admin. And the things we're so good at in the rehearsal room, we would need to learn from ourselves about how to do that in the rest of the organization. It is difficult. Giving people honest feedback is difficult. I think the key is that actually, as a really good leader, you have to spend enough time with people that you understand who they are. Because what I do as a stage director is I don't come with just all my big ideas. I come, and then I spend actually the 2 first weeks of rehearsals. Honestly, I'm really finding out who you are. And I'm trying to find out, actually, okay, if I say that, something goes on in her eyes. If I say that, she looks confused and she doesn't get it. People are different. If I want to feedback, some singers like to have it quite rough and need to be told, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. Pull yourself together, come on. It needs to be hard. They need to dig a ton with a teaspoon the whole way, because if it doesn't hurt, it's not real art. And other singers would crush, and you would need to go completely different with them, always saying, it's fantastic, you're amazing. Maybe it would be even more amazing if you did. People are different. So the only way of handling that is actually, and that's the tough part about being, God, I sometimes envy, when you hear about leaders in the old days, when you talk, in Denmark you have a thing called the hours of the director, which means like coming last and leaving first. And of course today it's often the other way around. If you imagine, today, to be a real leader, you have to spend so much energy understanding the people in your organization. You can't do it one-to-one with everybody, of course, but then you have to do it through others. And without that, you're never truly going to make people better. Okay.
And then just one more point before we break for questions. And that's around, we've been talking about being an authentic leader, but also a lot of leaders have been pulled in the direction of, well, you need to be collaborative as well. You've got to be a really collaborative leader, take on other people's ideas. How do you have that balance between asking people for their ideas and getting suggestions and having your own clear view and knowing when to be directive?
I don't think there is such as much of a contradiction as it sounds, actually. It's like when I stage an opera. Unless I, as a stage director, we do an opera, let's say we do Figaro by Mozart. It can be staged in a million different ways. And if we ask the singers, so how do you want to do it? They would, one singer would do it a Rococo style, another would think it's modern social realism, a third one would think it's a Star Trek show and play it like, they're on board a spaceship. And then when they have to discuss, is it a happy ending? They would have to do a vote about, how would you ever make any decisions? When you come in as the audience, if there is ever any result, you would see a thing that goes in 20 different directions. There wouldn't be anybody saying anything to you. So that's the role of the director. Somebody has to call the shots and say, we're going this way. I'm taking the risk. We're going to Northeast this time. I'm going to inspire all of you to go to Northeast, but this is where we're heading, and I make that decision, and that's my call. But having said that, on first night, God, I tell you, I hate first nights. You've been working on a project for years and years and years and years and years, and you feel like almost a god creating this universe, and you feel so powerful. And then the first night, everybody else is making themselves ready, and this is the moment. This is what counts. And the stage director, we just have to sit in the stalls on row K or whatever it's called with sweaty palms and hope it goes well. And I so often wished I had a joystick or a remote control, or at least they could give us, I think, a little red flag that you could wave and say, that doesn't count, that was a mistake. Put it another way, I have a lot of excuses for why the show doesn't work, but it doesn't really matter, because either it works or it doesn't. So if the singers haven't taken over those ideas, if it hasn't become true for them, if they're not great, I am per definition not great. And that's the weird thing about leadership. For me, the dilemma is you're completely indispensable, and yet you're completely unable to do it. You have to do it through others. That dilemma encapsulates it for me. And that's why I'm authentic, because my real leadership tool is my story about why we do opera. And everything I do can be boiled down to that. Every priority I have to make financially, every decision to hire a stage director, every way I communicate about it, the way we plan the chorus hours, it all kind of boils down to what is important. Why do we do opera? And that is not a story. That's why I'm authentic, I think, if I may say so, because that was not written by the HR department, by the comms director. That's me. That's my heart blood, as we say in Denmark. That's me. That's something I've been working on since I started asking those questions when I got hired for the job at 27. Why do we do opera? But the way I then express it, the way I do deal with it, is always in conversations. And those conversations will be different. The core of it is the same, but I'll express it differently if I talk to Placido Domingo, I'll talk to someone who's never been to opera before, or a school kid who doesn't even know what opera is. Of course it's different, but the core of it is the same. And I actually find that for me, great ideas always happen when I come very clearly having a feeling about what is important, but then I have a conversation. I really rarely have great ideas on my own. They always happen in conversations with set designers, with my colleagues, with other people. That's when I really, truly have ideas.
Great. Oh, what a good point to open the conversation to our audience. So do you have any questions?
Right, I've clearly covered everything.
That's it, yeah. Clear as day.
Yes.
Oh, we have Keith. We have another.
Thank you. I'm just intrigued to know why you do opera.
So why I do opera is because I grew up in a home without a television, and when I was 9, my father took me to the theater, and I saw a play, and I completely was bowled over by this world of storytelling. And then I found out there's something called opera, and I saw my first opera when I was 10, Carmen. And of course, what does Carmen say to a 10-year-old? It's an opera about jealousy and sex, and just really not very child-friendly. I think in retrospect, of course, in hindsight, what struck me was that it gave me a language for emotions. What I struggled with as a kid was I was very good with this. I was maybe less good at expressing this. And opera gave me a language for that, for understanding about, obviously not consciously back then, but opera gives us a language for all the things in life where words fail us. And it's so easy to use words, I find. What I struggle to do is to be honest about love and fear and hate and my demons, and all of that I can express through the arts. And that's why opera interests me, because often I hear that opera is irrelevant. And actually, when I look at life, we claim that all the things we do in everyday life is relevant. But what really matters in life, if it's not love and death and hate and longing and jealousy and fear, I always, when people say, why do they sing, I love you, I love you, I love you, and it takes them 5 minutes, or they say, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying, and it takes them 7 minutes to die, I always say, I think that's pretty quick. Actually, in opera, we just spend time on what's important in life. We claim that humans are rational. We keep also in organizations looking for rational behavior, causality. And yet again and again and again we see that people behave very, very irrationally and do stupid things and don't do as expected on an individual and even on a collective basis. So opera reminds us that life is much more complex than what we claim when we just analyze it with words.
Thank you. Any question? Oh, we have one over here.
So typically when a leader is in an organization, they get to build a team around them, or when they recruit someone, they can recruit someone that they feel they'll be able to work with on a long-term basis. Have you ever had an experience where because presumably you recruit for talent, you recruit for the person who can sing that the best. Have you had situations where you've had to recruit people who you find it very hard to get on with, but they're the right person for the role, and how you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I'm most proud to say, actually, that I can certainly prove I'm not corrupt, because I have people I really dislike that I've hired for main roles. That's not, I mean, for me, that's not important. As I say, if the bullshit exceeds the talent, and if they take it out on an organization, there can be a point where you say, no, actually, that's not worth it. But on a personal level, it's completely uninteresting. I've had to work with people that I, on a personal level, find quite unpleasant, or if it works for the show, it works for the show. What I do mind, just before it all sounds soft and as if it's all kind of, you know, nice and touchy-feely, if somebody in the cast doesn't want to do the show and resists it or can't handle it, but, you know, hasn't quite woken up to it yet, then it's absolutely my responsibility to fire them or move them and take care of that, because they can't see that themselves, and in the end they will damage the show. So it's not about being nice, but as long as people are in the show, then it's my bloody responsibility to make them good, and I have to find the language that will inspire them. Even if I don't find that that's the right thing, I need to make them good. So as long as they're in the show, it's my job to make them good, and if the talent is good enough, I'll find a way. That's because I am vain, and I do want in the end the best possible talent in the show. My vanity kind of exceeds my laziness of not wanting to deal with them.
One more question over here.
Hi, I'm really interested to hear about what makes a diva or a prima donna other than their ability to have a great voice.
So if we talk opera singer diva, then of course you do need a great voice, obviously, and you need to be able to technically use it, and then to be a really great diva you also need to be able to express something unique with it, to touch people. And some people just have that when they open their mouths, just people start crying and they don't quite know why. In order to be a real opera star today, the competition is big enough that you also need quite good ability as an actor. It's not necessarily about looking great, you know, being young and slim, but it's about being confident about your body, being confident about the way you look and the way you use that on stage. And that is also a main factor, obviously, in making it. And there is such a thing as star quality, and we all know it. Some people are just more charismatic. If you've ever spent just 30 seconds with Placido Domingo in a room, you will know that is just God touched him, and there is the charisma there that just, you can't teach that. And that's why it's unfair, and that's why you have to talk honestly about talent. Some people just have that and other people don't. And you have to be honest about that, because it's going to happen anyway. But as I said, I think what defines diva behavior, whether it be in artists or leaders or anywhere else in the organization, is very much, for me, comes from this idea that people don't really know whether they're good enough. I remember once, I'd been running the Royal Danish Opera for a year, and I was, as you said, 27 when I was appointed to run the national company in my country, so I wanted to prove myself. I was sitting in an important meeting, as I remember, and in came the tenor in full, you know, knighthood gear, you know, from the Middle East. You know, it's one of the perks of my job. You get to have meetings with people in knight gear. And he starts yelling at me, and he's very angry. And he says, you know, you assigned me to this fantastic part, and we're opening in 2 weeks' time, and I'm really nervous because there's not time enough. And I wanted to, you know, be good, so I was like, oh my God, I haven't assigned time enough. This is terrible. And I started to open my drawers and looking at the plans, and then I was like, oh no, there's plenty of time, because last time we did this show there was only 5 weeks, and this time there's 6. And then we agreed in the big evaluation meeting that it would always be fine if there's 6 weeks for any show. So there's plenty of time. Don't worry about it. It didn't work. Because what he meant was not, there's not enough time. What he meant was, you've given me this big part, and I'm shedding my pants, and I can't sleep at night because I'm so worried that I'm going to be a failure. So please, 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 can we say that if I fail, it was because there wasn't time enough. Not only did I thus demonstrate that I don't understand him, I also took away the only safety net he'd kind of mentally built up for himself to go on stage, and said, no, you have no safety net. You go out and be exposed. That was clearly really bad leadership. And that's what being a diva is about for me. The pressure you're under when you live in that area where you can never quite be sure whether it's good enough. How can you measure it? If only you knew that if you've done this, and this, and you leave your desk at 4 and you've answered all the phone calls, you're a success. Great, I've done my job. But if you live in a constant flux of like, people say it's great, but is it good enough? What about the other talent? Are people honest? How am I as an artist? You know, in any job, that will create a personal pressure where you need, and my claim is that what you need is love. You need love as a management tool. Not, of course, on a romantic level, but love in the sense that I do love you, in the sense that I care about you enough to protect you and help you and support you when you go through this immense pressure you've been put under. Love including understanding and empathy. And that, I think that's where diva behavior really comes from, the pressure that some people operate under when they have to perform super exposed on a global stage without ever really truly being able to know whether they're good enough.
Thank you. I think we're out of time. We're not yet. Can I ask you just one final question?
Yes.
So if you were to write your memoirs, or if you were to look back at your 27-year-old self and give yourself one piece of leadership advice in 140 characters,
I think
what would it be?
Less. I don't know how many. Don't be afraid. I think I've spent too much time worrying, and somehow, I get better at that with age. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Just do it and try to do it as good as you can, and don't worry.
Great. Well, don't worry, guys. Thank you so much.